All right, guys. Well, let's get started. And Brent Abel here, webtennis.com and core4athlete.com. And welcome to another live Zoom session. Today we've got Sean Brawley. And first of all, before I kind of do my little intro, and then Sean, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us a little bit of your background. I think one of the all-time great names, Sean Brawley. I mean, it's just such a solid. I mean, I could see where you'd be like a Sean Brawley, be like a Tony Gwynn. I mean, a really, high average hitter. I don't know. Anyway, I've just been thinking about that for a few days, ever since we decided to kind of cook up this session. But Sean Brawley, a former top 150 singles and doubles player, ATP. I think your senior year at USC played #1 in both singles and doubles. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And so went out in the tour, and first thing, why don't you give us your 25 words or less, your elevator pitch, whatever it is, as to what you're doing these days, Sean?
Well, my 2-minute bio elevator speech is after the tour. I went into business for about 6 years, didn't like it, got back into tennis as a coach. And within just a couple of months of doing that, I was rewarded by getting introduced to Tim Galway, who wrote The Inner Game of Tennis. And I feel incredibly fortunate that he offered to mentor me. And we had a great mentor-student relationship for over 6 years. And I've done a lot of inner game over the years, inner game of tennis and inner game golf, inner game music workshops. And in 2000, I left. I was a tennis director at a club for about 5 years. I left and I started my own company. And in 2001, or actually 2000, I was introduced to Pete Carroll and began a relationship with him where I coached him for about 9 months prior to him getting the head coaching job at USC. And when he did that, I became the primary mental performance coach for the team. I have some really cool stories about that. Same time, I got referred to the New York Yankee Player Development Group. So I basically started taking what I knew about inner game and how to facilitate learning and performance, because I wasn't a content expert in football or baseball, and started taking it to other sports. And the same year, Kaiser Permanente, an internal managing director for Kaiser Permanente, asked me to create a coaching program for their internal managers. And so that's where everything starts, like right there. I started doing other sports, started my corporate coaching programs. And that's what I'm doing today. Today I'm actually like 40 million people. Spencer Stewart, which is one of the largest executive search firms in the world, hired me a year and a half ago and purchased my intellectual property for my Leader as Coach program. But because of COVID, they had company-wide layoffs, and they didn't have enough work for me. So I'm back on my own with my own company. And to be honest, I hate to say it, I'm enjoying my time off. And that's kind of, that's my 2-minute bio. And then I've really explored that inner game. I've gone as deep as and what I've discovered is just so interesting, fascinating. It's been healing, helpful, and look forward to sharing a little snippet of that today with the people who are online.
Well, I think the title teaser we put out there was the secret ingredient for how great athletes become #1. The 2 hidden patterns that you discovered interviewing Federer, Halep, and Dimitrov. But before we go into that, I want to go back to when you were on the tour. And It sounds like this was prior to when you met Tim Galway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So my just as you're talking about it, my curiosity is, if you'd met Tim Galway, let's say when you were at USC or right when you went out of the tour, right when you went out on the tour, would that, I mean, we'll never know, but do you think that could have made a difference top 150 to maybe top 50 for you?
I'm very clear that the reason why my performance and my corresponding ranking was where it was and not higher. I mean, everything I've learned is about, and the whole essence of the inner game is like, what's getting in the way? And I had a lot getting in the way that I didn't know about. I had a lot of feelings. I had a lot of fear that would come up. And so there's no question in my mind. And I actually have like a little anecdote. It's not perfect, but 10 years after playing at SC, pretty close, 8 to 9 years after I was playing in the finals of one of the largest men's open tournaments in Southern Cal. And I was playing my coach, Dick Leach's son, in the final, who was in his senior year and 4-year All-American. And I was like a tennis director. So he's playing full time, how many hours a day, top of his game. And I win the first set. And I'm playing really well. And afterwards, Dick Leach said, and this is after about 2 or 3 years of me having worked with Tim, Dick Leach, in an interview in the paper, said, Sean played as well, if not better, than I ever saw him play at USC. That's not about me. That's literally about, like, if we engage in a process of going inside and finding out how we interfere with the expression of our feelings, of our performance, of our learning, it just is all the difference. It's just really important.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's a lot of unbelievably talented players that get to 150 in the world, which, by the way, is an amazing skill level. Amazing skill level. And I gotta believe that the thing that held you back, the same thing that holds a lot of these players who are ranked in the 150s back, is not the physical stuff. I mean, everyone's out there training, everyone's out there working. I mean, the strokes look to me like they all look like a commodity now. Like any 14-year-old kid can crush a forehand. But why? And I will get to the big question. But why do you feel there isn't enough emphasis or enough training in that area of what you're just describing in terms of what you now know? If you'd met Tim Galway before,
well, I think there's significantly more nowadays than there was. Every Olympic gold medalist starting in 1994 had a mental performance coach, whereas like 10 years, like 2 games before that, like only like a very small percentage had. So my friend Pete Carroll, he's working with a sports psychologist up in Seattle. He believes strongly in it. A lot of people believe strongly in it. But there are inner blocks that are just not going to get cleared unless there's attention paid to, the internal landscape, and really finding out, well, why? Like, why did I miss this really easy shot at break point when there really is no reason for me to have missed that? Like, if you just simply look at it that way, what's the reason you missed that? There's no good reason I missed that shot.
right.
So that leads to, well, something inside missed that. Something caused you to miss that shot that you're not aware of. And you can, we all have blind spots. So it's basically, the basic idea is like, if your window is dirty, you don't have to put clean in. You just have to get the dirt off the window, and then you can see clearly. And the more I've done that, the more my life is improved in every area.
That's great. Okay. Well, listen, let's get to the big question here. So I watched your TED Talk, and
The power of focus.
let's see. Yeah, what's the note I made? I think the first thing that kind of came away was, get my notes in front of me here. Quote, and this is a direct quote, really from within the first couple of minutes of your TED Talk. It's the ability to control our attention determines how we'll perform any task. And I thought that was, I mean, for me anyway, that just kind of, it was, well, of course. And yet I don't think I think in tennis matches, we don't really simplify it enough in terms of that ability or working on that skill. Again, you go to YouTube or you go to Facebook and all you see are players grinding through more topspin forehands as if that's the answer to the game. But I think that this quote from you, the ability to control our attention determines how we'll perform any task. So what's my question? My question is that what we're talking about here with the secret ingredient for how great athletes become number one?
In part, because essentially focus is everything. That's a quote. That's a direct quote from Phil Jackson. Plain and simple, his book, Sacred Hoops. First thing, focus is everything. So we should listen to that.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And so what I'd like to do is divide our time in two parts, because there's a well-known process that has been well-researched. There's several books out there, Talent Code, Peak. And so there's a process by which is well known for people to become masterful. So I'd just like to kind of share a little bit about that in case anyone who's listening isn't aware of that, because focus has a place with that. And then I'll answer your question so that this becomes a context. So that process includes three things in terms of the research. I would add a fourth. And one of them is masterful coaching. So anybody who becomes masterful, if you look at the process, they have a masterful coach. So not just any coach, somebody who's masterful, who has a lot of experience and knows what they're doing and can, because we're limited by our coach typically. Like a player is going to be limited to the extent of their coach. So if you find somebody that is masterful, then you have a better shot of reaching your full potential. The second aspect or factor is deliberate practice. So just to give you a distinction between practice and deliberate practice, I grew up mostly practicing in a rote way. I hit a ton of balls against my garage door and the wall. I drilled because that was what we were told to do. Forehands down the line, cross court. I mean, and then I played a lot of matches. So that's what saved me, is I played a lot of matches. But mostly, when people think of practice, like in music, scales, just this rote kind of boring kind of practice. Deliberate practice is different, and this is the first start where focus really comes in. Deliberate practice is where you have a very clear focus of what you need to do to improve, so that when you're practicing, let me back up. So focus is controlled by the reticular activating system, and it's the guardian at the gate. It controls the information that comes into your perceptual system. So if a player is clear themselves what they need to improve, every single ball they hit, there's bits of information that are now allowed in. Whereas if you're practicing in a rote way, the aperture of the attention control system is more limited. Soon as you have a clear intention, it starts to open more, and it allows more information that has two qualities to it that's really important. The information is relevant to what you want to learn, and it's of a high quality. So when you combine these two things of high quality, relevant information, suddenly the learning and progress becomes accelerated. But there's a second component to it that is often overlooked, even in these books, which is where the inner game comes in, is that when you're focused in any moment, doing any activity, it inhibits the negative emotions and the thinking. So the mind quiets down when you're focused, and that reduces self-interference. And so whether it's in a particular point, game, or match, if you're focused in the moment, you will get high quality, relevant information for what you want to do, and the self-interference will be reduced. That's a formula right there for increased improvement in attaining high performance. So that's deliberate practice, focus, and purpose. You know why you're improving, you know why this is the thing you're going to improve. It changes everything. Then the third is perseverance or grit or commitment or passion. There's many different words, but it represents a force inside of emotion that basically keeps you on the path. It's kind of obvious. I almost hate to say it, but basically, you know, if you get off the path, there's no way to achieve mastery. So like I took 5 guitar lessons. I didn't like it. I stopped. Today I'm a terrible guitar player. I mean, it's, you know. And then I think there's a fourth that's not talked about, a different kind of focus, more of the macro focus, where some specialization or focus is usually needed. There's some research that's showing there's a number of people out there that can do, like, say, multiple sports, and that's good for them. But in general, at some point, I focused more on tennis than I did the other sports that I played. So why am I separating it out? So this is the process by which hundreds of players and athletes, let's just stick with tennis, hundreds of tennis pros are engaged in this process. So why is it that some are in the top 150 and make it there, and then some others make it to a top 100 and top 50 and top 20, and then in the top 10, and then eventually number 1? And so what I discovered 3 years ago, which was so cool, because I actually started working with the Wilson Racket Sports global leadership team about 4 years ago. And I helped facilitate, in the end, I just helped facilitate like 3 of their global leadership meetings. And because of the relationship I established, right before Indian Wells, that's where they do all their video shoots and photo shoots for the advertising for the year, because everybody's there at the Indian Wells tournament. So they wanted to do a video series on mental readiness, and so I had a nice relationship. So it was pretty cool. It's like a dream come true. And in the preparation of it, and in the asking the questions, you know, real time, which I'd never interviewed players before. I'm a coach, so I've learned to ask a ton of questions. And there's this one I was interviewing Madison Keys, and at the time she was 7 in the world. I haven't looked her up. I have no idea what she's ranked right now. But I was interviewing Madison Keys, and she was describing what somebody else had said too. So the first pattern, and I ended up interviewing over 15 of their pros. Not all these interviews, by the way, are on the Wilson website still. And so the player before also shared a similar story of like how they got like rocket boosted up in their confidence and their feeling of, I can do this. And what she said was, you know, Serena Williams had always been my idol. And so when I beat her, you know, it felt like a real breakthrough. And all of a sudden something opened in me, and I thought, I can do this. I can achieve my dream. And what I started to notice, and this is what's interesting, is every single one of them, when I look back at my notes, everyone had a breakthrough experience. I'll give you an example. And they're all different, so we're all unique. Roger Federer, his breakthrough experience was winning Junior Wimbledon. When he won Junior Wimbledon on that stage, something shifted in him, and this dream and idea like came down into earth, and he said, oh my God, I can be #1 in the world. I can do this. As an example, Gael Monfils won Junior Wimbledon, Australian Open, Junior Wimbledon, French Open Junior, gets to the US Open, gets injured in the second round. It wasn't enough. For him, the breakthrough experience that he described was losing to Andre Agassi at the French when Andre was #1 in the world at the time. And he lost in 5 sets, and he said, oh my God, I can do it. And so that's the first thing, is that like you can do all this training. And by the way, I've researched this in other sports, and I've been in the corporate world, so I've been asking lots of questions. This is really consistent. I have no proof, like, other than what I'm sharing with you. You can look up, anybody could research, because there's some interviews out there where you can, like for instance, Sloane Stephens is not a Wilson Pro, but she won the US Open. She went through the same exact process that I'm describing. She had a breakthrough experience, and then, as I will now discuss, she and the others, some others, have a breakdown experience. This starts to give us a clue of what it takes. And there's a difference between a state of being that you have and a stage of development. And what I mean by that is, like, a lot of people have experienced, say, playing in the zone, which we know is a state. And it doesn't last typically. It doesn't last. But when we're in it, it feels incredible. And we know in that moment, this is the best that I can possibly play right now. Like, you don't want anything more. You don't want to improve it's like, oh my God, this is absolutely incredible. But to be like in the top 5 and #1, it requires a stage of development of your consciousness, of who you think you are, that allows you to stay up there. So here's the pattern. The first thing is they have this breakthrough experience. The next thing that happens is they have now entered a new world where the contracts and the money is different. The tournaments that they're going to play is different. They're getting treated different. The agents everybody starts treating them different. They suddenly have fans that they didn't have before. All of this expands. This is literally, you're watching, nobody realizes, you're watching the expansion and expression of an individual's talent and their being. You're watching it. It literally, their world expands. And for most of them, not all of them, they start feeling incredible, intense inner pressure. And if you want to think of your identity or your ego as the limit of your comfort zone, if you want to think about it in terms of comfort zone, what is happening is that their idea of who they are is actually now expanded way beyond what they actually are comfortable with. And so there's this real shakiness and pressure that they start experiencing. Another word for it, anxiety. They start feeling a lot of anxiety. So what I was shocked to find out that is consistent across sports is that, and this was with Madison, talking with Madison, is she's talking about her breakthrough experience and then talking about the internal pressure, and then she got injured. She hurt her wrist in a very strange way. And a little voice, I have no idea where it came from, said this was a gift. And I was like, what? Like literally inside, I'm like, what? I'm not gonna like, and so, but I did. I like had the courage to say, Madison, I have to ask you a question, and this may sound like really strange, but if that injury was a gift, what was the gift? Oh my God. She sat straight up. She began smiling, and she said, oh my God, it's the first time in my life that I couldn't play tennis if I wanted to. It was like a release valve. All the internal pressure went away. And there was like 3 or 4 things that became, not all of them who I asked the question of said the same 4, but elements of the same 4. That's pretty consistent. You can see it in the interviews. 1, gave me, released the internal pressure. 2, gave me time to reflect on this new world I'd be living in. Getting used to and comfortable with that fact. 3, first time I couldn't play tennis even if I wanted to, which got me back in touch with the original reason why I was playing tennis in the first place. And I stopped playing for my family. I stopped playing for my fans. And she said, I hit the ball with joy like I did when I first started playing. Mm. And I literally, I just couldn't believe the answer. So if to simplify it, is that when the focus comes back home internally, you're in control of that. If your focus is out there and how like the world is going to see you and fans and all the out there, you have no control over that. And so meaning is the key word. She rediscovered the gold of this wound. The gift of the wound was she rediscovered meaning and purpose. And that allowed her then to, to go and play in this new world much more comfortably. I'll stop there in case you have any.
Well, first of all, yeah, I want to ask anyone this is brilliant. And if you see me typing, I'm making notes because even though we're recording this, guys, if you got any comments or any questions for Sean, go ahead and type them into the chat area.
So while they're chatting, I'll give you just a couple other examples of in doing my research of how. So the idea basically is you either expanding your idea of yourself, or somehow like getting beyond yourself. So another example is Pete Sampras. My personal coach became the head pro at the Jack Kramer Tennis Club, where Pete Sampras and lots of other pros were. So I had a conversation with Pete, and I actually discovered it later in an interview. When he was 17, he won the US Open for the first time in 1990. Mm-hmm. And then he also started experiencing this tremendous internal pressure. So he didn't and he really came to the fore the next year in 91 in the US Open. I believe he lost in the quarterfinals. Now, his example, he didn't get injured, but he took a moment, a reflective moment, and he basically asked himself, what are you going to do with this? Like, you've just had a year of anxiety and pressure. You lost in the quarterfinals. This was a terrible experience. Do you really want this? Do you really want to be number 1? And something inside said yes. And that was it. He took him a year to get used to the yes, and all of his next 14 Grand Slams start in 93. And he has a really big run from 93 to like 97, I think. He wins a couple more after that, but it's like there's a concentrated period of time where he's comfortable being number one in the world 5 years in a row. But it came with a conscious decision. Tara Lipinski and Sarah Hughes, back-to-back gold medal winners ice skating. In 98, Tara Lipinski came from out of nowhere to win the gold medal. She said, they asked her, how did you do it? And she says, I felt such joy for some inexplicable reason prior to my last skating performance, and I put that into my performance. So that feeling of joy took her out of herself, which allowed her to express her abilities in a way that wouldn't be possible if she was still inside the domain of her ego. Sarah Hughes, almost the exact same situation. Like, I think she was expected to win bronze. She had a different word for it. She said, I felt such gratitude, such gratitude. So what this is pointing out is like there's this realm of consciousness where we're the sovereigns, where we make the choice of what we want in our life. Or joy and gratitude, which the Eastern philosophies have long told us these are portholes. These are portals to this other world that is beyond our ego. They carry us beyond ourselves. Sometimes we just get a glimpse of it. But and I gave you Joe Dispenza as somebody to look into. He's
Right.
done a ton of research into this. And this is what we need to be practicing. This is what we need to be cultivating, is our ability to control our attention and our presence, and to cultivate joy and gratitude and these emotions and thoughts that are a part of this upper domain that allow us to have an extraordinary life.
Yeah. So we're talking about all the examples you've been given of world-class athletes. I mean, off the charts athletes. What about the rest of us? What about the rest of us in terms of, and I'm thinking more of competitive senior players? Is there, because you were talking about world-class athletes, I mean, they're not only gifted athletically, but they're working full time at this thing. And so for the rest of us who are playing senior tournaments, or the rest of us who are playing league stuff, and I'm not talking about just kind of the casual club player. I'm talking about, the senior players like myself who are out there competing, trying to win another coveted gold ball. How do we take what you're talking about and apply it to ourselves, even though maybe we can't play as often as they can, maybe we're not as gifted athletically as they are? What can we take? What can we take from what you're talking about, these world-class athletes, and apply it to ourselves in terms of being able, I think what you keep saying is be able to get out of our own way and find that joy that seems to help us play better?
Well, so, each person listening, is going to hear like something will stand out for them that can be a clue. So let's just start there. So for one person, it might be, oh, wow, yeah, I did used to play tennis with joy, and now it just seems so hard. Like, that might be a good reminder to like do some reflection. That it's the way I'd answer it is there are no band-aids, so there's no like tip I can give. What I can share again and refer back to is like what comes up is deliberate practice, for instance. And I actually have an ebook that's free. It's on the Wilson website still. It's called I don't like the title, but it's the 5 Pillars of Massive Consistency. I probably would call it something else. And it actually refers back to your original question about focus, because what I discovered with the inner game and how I contributed to it, in my opinion, is the inner game is this wonderful approach which is based mostly on increasing your self-awareness of what is, like increasing your awareness of your body, of your balance, increasing your awareness of the ball, of the racket. So whether it's you or the elements of the game, it's about that. But what I realize is that what we don't realize is that we're operating in a culture, and we don't see the culture, just like fish don't see the water. We're operating in general in a culture of fix it. So like, it's just, you can see it on the coaching websites. People post a video. Can you guys give me some suggestions? And 98% of the suggestions are always about technical instruction. Here's what the person's doing wrong. That misses. It's like an iceberg with the technique. The form that we see is literally, not even figuratively, it's just a tiny part of what actually is going on inside. So for instance, this ebook, it's about 17 pages. And there's videos that demonstrate the 5 exercises. They're awareness exercises. So what I'm trying to get to is the fact that suddenly, like about 10 years ago, when I moved back east, I was working with the high performance academy coaches, and I started to work with the German Davis Cup captain. And I realized that I had to do for myself what I helped Pete Carroll do like 10 years before, and that's get really clear on my coaching philosophy. And so when I did that, I had an epiphany one day, and it's so obvious. And I was dumbfounded that like I could have played this game for so long, coached so long, dived into the inner game so long, and I didn't see it. If you focus your attention on the most critical elements of the game, that reticular activating system just keeps opening. There is no limit to the information and learning that will happen. So my advice, so performance has 2 components. One, the long-term getting better, which allows your performance to improve over time. In any particular moment, you can play better and win tournaments if you're practicing in the most effective way. And then there's what I think most people think of as, what's your tip when I'm in a match and I want to beat somebody? I'm not going to really go there today. So when you focus, and a couple of them are overlooked. So when you like ball tracking, so here are the elements. What I realized is that relaxed focus is the foundation for everything. So that's just a given. When you apply relaxed focus to tennis, the first thing that I suddenly realized is, oh my God, if you just put attention onto the most important moments of the ball coming to me, coming to you, that's it. It's simplicity in the most elegant way. If ball tracking is the single most important aspect of the game, and it is almost completely overlooked, ignored, and forgotten about. And if you practice it over time, it is a perceptual skill that can be improved. And when that improves, everything that follows in the sequence, everything that will follow in the sequence gets better.
Okay,
and
so
you can, let me just add that you can apply that to footwork and balance. You can apply that to contact point. And then ultimately it's, what's your intention? Where do you want to hit the ball?
So we've got, I promised I'd get you out of here at 45 after. We got about 4 minutes. So what is your what is your interpretation of Galway's bounce hit? Is that really what you're talking about with ball tracking, is bounce hit?
Well, that is one exercise. That's just one. That's helpful. No long. I actually discovered an exercise that's in the ebook that I share. I couldn't believe I'd ever find anything as effective. I mean, bounce hit has been 100% effective. I don't say that lightly. There's a lot of things I've tried and experiment with. You take a brand new student and you have them do bounce hit, you'll notice problems with their technique that will immediately go away. Immediately. Like, oh my God, like right there. Like you can get a taste of it. And it's been 100% successful. And there's an exercise in the book that's even like more helpful because it combines some elements. So that's a tool that enables what we're talking about, that enables more deliberate, focused practice on what's critical. Like, I'm not against form and technique. It's important. Grip is important. But these things are actually more important. And what I discovered is if I just simply go from ball tracking for a week or two and then balance for a week and then this is what happens. What the brain does is it differentiates and gets all this new information and improves this thing you're focusing on. And then there's a book called The Power of Habit, and he calls it Keystone Habits. And there's an interesting process that the brain then does at a certain point, which is predictable, which is called integration. And I forget the author's name, but he calls it the ripple effect. So you focus on balance, and at a certain point, the balance improvement will stop, and your attention starts integrating into your system, and it ripples out. And if there's like ball tracking that needs to get improved, you'll see that, you'll feel that. If it's, it just, stuff starts to ripple out and it pulls in information outside of the single reference point for awareness, if that makes any sense.
Like, we've run out of time, and I'm going to beg you to do chapter 2 of this sooner than later, because I've got more questions, and I'm sure everyone else has got more questions.
Well, and I see that there's some questions from the listeners, and I'm very sorry I didn't get to answer those, but.
Well, listen, so the best way to get in touch with you, over at your website, SeanBrawley.com. Also, you're on Facebook as well. They can just go over to Facebook and find you over there.
Yeah, and they can feel free to email me at Sean, SEAN, at SeanBrawley.com. That's my email address. I'm happy to answer questions that way.
Good. Wish we had more time today, Sean. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
This
has been a lot of fun. And guys, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and post the replay probably later tonight. I got some traveling to do this afternoon. But until then, Sean, thanks again for your time. Appreciate it. Guys, get out there today, wherever you are. Help someone else have a great day. And we'll do this again soon. Thanks again, Sean.
Thanks, Brett.